And we are live. Hi, good evening, everybody. Welcome to She Built It Boss Lady Chronicles. I am Sharita Gaskins Tillett. I am your host, and this is the show where we feature the amazing stories of women who are owning their power to transform their lives, and usually by extension, the lives of others. And I am super excited about tonight's guest. I have been waiting to interview her for a long time. We've run into a couple of reschedules and other things, but tonight is finally the night. But I'm going to give a couple minutes for other people to come in. And while we do, first of all, welcome back. I know I have been on hiatus for a few weeks, so I'm happy to be back with you. A couple of reminders. First, this coming Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern, I am hosting the Press Pause mini retreat. So this is a perfect time. It's the middle of the year. If you are feeling overwhelmed, and you need a reset, this is a perfect reset for you. So join us. I'll put the links in the notes here, but join us on Saturday at 11, completely free. But get your reset on. And then registration is still open for a weekend for me, the Premier Wellness Experience for Professional Women that is happening October 2nd through the 5th in Grand Cayman. So we would love to have you there this year. We were in Grand Cayman last year. This is going to be spectacular. It's always a great time, but it gets better and better each time. So I would encourage you to come. So let's go ahead and get started. Actually, you know what? Let me see if I can get my light to come back on. If not, then we'll just get started without a light. It's been acting up. Yeah, we'll just do it without the light. That's okay. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce tonight's guest. So I have joining me tonight Dr. Ayanna Buckner, who has committed her career to addressing the needs of communities that have historically been underserved by health resources. Board certified in preventive medicine, public health, and internal medicine, she is the principal of Community Health Cooperative, a consulting firm that assists organizations with the planning, implementation, and evaluation of community-based health programming. Dr. Buckner uses the pen name Rosey Lee as she pursues her passion for writing fiction. Rosey writes stories about complicated families and complex friendships, but a happy ending is guaranteed. She is a nominee for 2025 Georgia Author of the Year Award for the Gardins of Edin, her debut novel. The sequel, A Gardin Wedding, was released on May 13th. Welcome, Dr. Ayanna.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So how are you doing this evening? It's great to have you here finally.
And please call me Ayanna. No formalities needed.
Okay. All right. Great. I'm going to take my glasses off too, because I just needed them to see your bio. It's crazy. But anyway, so, I usually have people start just kind of from the beginning. What has been your journey? I know that you work in community health now, but what has kind of been your journey through medicine? Did you always want to be a physician? When did you first get the bug?
Mm-hmm. Well, I wanted to be a fashion designer and an actress. I'm really more of the creative type of person. So it's funny, many people in my life are like, how did you go from the doctor stuff to the creative stuff? And I was like, actually, it was the other way around for me. Because I am just more inclined to writing, acting, fashion design, that kind of thing. And I always enjoyed writing and just felt like it would just be a part of my life. But essentially, because I switched school systems and also because my parents had put me in school a year early, I graduated from high school at 16, and my parents allowed me to believe that they would let me study acting and fashion design in New York up until the summer before my senior year in high school. And they were like, oh no, you're 16, you're not leaving. And I'm like, wait, what? So then I decided if I can't study fashion design and acting in New York, then I'm not going to study it at all, which was actually what my parents wanted me to decide.
Okay.
So I'd done pipeline programs for medicine at Xavier all throughout junior high and high school. And so I decided to kind of listen to what they'd been programming me to do. And I really fell in love with working toward health equity. At the time, we didn't call it that, but that's what we call it now.
Okay. All right. And so that's really an interesting kind of pivot So that creative juice was always still there, though, I assume.
It was. And so I made a very conscious decision, though, during my freshman year of college that I was either going to just kind of commit to medicine or not. And so I
Mhm.
had this kind of moment in my freshman English class where my professor gave some feedback on this portfolio. And he's like, you can actually write, And I was like, well,
Mm.
I don't know how to mix this with medicine. So, you know what? I'm going to just put it on the side for now, and eventually I'll come back to it. And so
Okay.
I went through residency, did a combined residency program in internal medicine and preventive medicine. And whenever you do a residency in preventive medicine, you also get a master's degree in public health in most programs. That's what
Okay.
happens. And so I did that. And then I took a position at Morehouse School of Medicine in the Department of Community Health and Preventive Medicine. And so during that time, I did primarily preventive medicine and community health work, teaching residents and students about community health. And so I did that and worked as a PRN, float doctor in our clinics. And that was my life. And so I decided that I would do community health consulting kind of later in life. That was
Okay.
always my plan. But
Sure.
then some opportunities presented themselves where I just, I had the opportunity to resign from my position and pursue having my own community health consulting firm. So I did that. And one of my main reasons for doing that was so that I could have control over my schedule to write. It
Okay.
wasn't the
Yeah.
only
So
reason.
I love that part, having control over your schedule. And I appreciate that you recognize that, because again, there are a lot of people who feel kind of stuck in the position that they're in,
Mhm.
and they don't see another way out. But I love that you owned your power to take your schedule and say, well, wait a minute. If I do it this way, then I get more of my time back and I can spend time doing other things.
Yeah.
So tell me, what gave you the I guess the willpower, the knowledge to know to do that? Because again, so many people just feel like, well, this is, I made my bed hard, I need to lay in it.
Yeah, so I spend a lot of time thinking about how hard I was working and for whom I was working.
Hmm.
For me, I'm still doing work for the communities that I care about. So I knew that that would remain consistent. And though I believed in all the projects I was working on, I had to work on the things my boss said I had to work on. And I
Ah, uh-huh.
wasn't the kind of kid who liked people telling me what to do. So it was
Yes.
even harder for me as an adult, obviously, to get through medical school and residency and to progress, particularly at the beginning parts of our career. We kind of have to do a
Right.
good amount of that.
Sure.
But as I, really just kind of got my swimming legs, I guess, as they say, I realized, I was at a point in my career where I really wanted to make decisions to work on things that really fueled me and that I was excited about and that just made me happy. And so
So,
that's why I decided to go ahead and make that change.
so what are the types of projects that you're working on now that make you happy in the community health world?
Oh, sure. That's a great question. So I've been doing some consulting work for a good while on um, self-measured blood pressure in clinical settings. So in a variety of settings, anywhere from community health centers to large health systems. So my client has funding from the government to fund demonstration projects around hypertension. So I've worked with that project, with various iterations of that project for several years. I've forgotten exactly how many.
Okay.
One of my favorite things to do is to consult with philanthropic organizations and help them with what I like to call strategic grant making. So recognizing what their priorities are as a funder and figuring out how to structure their policies, procedures, their programming, their vision, so
Hmm.
that they fund the work that aligns best with that. But also, as they grow and as they assess and see their progress, they might make some changes about that, which I think is just appropriate with growth. You see, how is this grant making doing and what other things should we be considering funding? So I
Hmm.
liken it to personal shopping, right? So a personal shopper enjoys shopping. They just love spending other people's money.
Yes.
And that's kind of how I think about it. I get to advise people on how to fund community health programs.
So what are some of the programs that you have suggested to some of these funders? If you can divulge that.
Sure. So what I would say is that it's more about grant making strategies, what
Mhm.
focus areas, whether it's subcategories of women's health, or for example, I have one funder that does work or funds work around women and children. And so looking at, are there specific groups that are being left out of their funding and how they should pivot to that? Also thinking about like what their response would be as a result of COVID, what their response would be as a result of external changes in the United States, that
Mm,
kind of thing. Yeah.
I see. I see. Okay. All right. And so what has been your favorite part of that journey, of that endeavor?
Hmm. I think probably seeing the results. That's a part of the evaluation piece, right? Seeing the results, but also seeing how one particular organization in particular has grown to evolve
Mm.
to really get their board thinking about equity, to get their board to not be afraid to use the word equity, and to have a board that still uses the word equity to this day. And I say that with my whole chest.
Yeah, I was gonna say because equity is kind of a dirty word.
Is it to some
Yeah,
people? Not to me.
to some right in some circles nowadays.
It is, but it's a regular vocabulary word to me, and I'm not going to stop using it. It's the work that I do. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's excellent. I love that. So I want to pivot just a little bit to because you talked about how you were always a creative, if you will,
Mhm.
and that you started this new endeavor so that you would have time to write. So I know
Yes.
you mentioned that you had a professor who told you that you had a gift for writing, but when did you fully embrace that? And when did you decide to start writing? Did you start with novels? Did you write essays first?
Yeah.
How did this gift evolve?
Sure. So, I left my full-time position in July. Well, June 30th, 2014 was my last day. And so I had this big plan to start writing immediately, but there was a nonprofit that aligned very closely with my heart that said, "Hey, we're new, we're just getting started. Do you want to come do some voluntary work with us?" And so I did that and put my writing on hold for a bit more. And then my business started growing. So it took me about 4 years. So in about 2018, I said, "Hey, it's been 4 years. I have got to figure out how to make some progress with writing." And so I'd gotten an idea. I think I'd figured out it was about 28, 29. I got an idea for a novel. And just over that course of time, I was just trying to figure out what I wanted that novel to be more specifically about. And just really didn't have dedicated time to work on it, but just kind of let it stew, which is kind of how I write. I think about
Mhm,
stuff for
mhm.
a really long time
Yeah, yeah.
first, before I start writing. But I said, before I write a novel, I'm going to put together a website just so that as I'm building my platform as Rosey Lee, that if people want to see what I'm about, they have just a landing page just to kind of, see and get to know me a little bit better. And so one of my relatives decided, or she's a writer, and so she suggested that I write a short story. She's like,
Okay.
why don't you put a writing sample up on your website so people get an idea of your writing style? So I did that. And she said, "This is really good. You should write more. Or you should try to get this one published, and you should write more." So I did. And so I got I think 9 flash fiction stories. So flash fiction is very short stories, or it's a very short story. So I can give a whole little mini lecture on that.
Mhm.
But for me, I write flash fiction that's about 1,000 words. So it's telling a
Okay.
whole story in about 1,000 words. Of course, that story could be longer, but still
Sure.
telling a full story in 1,000 words. So I did that and thought, this really will give people a snapshot. So got those published and put together what's called a reader magnet. So a freebie so that people will get interested and sign up to your newsletter, or
Sure.
sign up for your newsletter. So I did that all before I started writing the novel. which was a way for me to get my feet wet and build my confidence because I didn't know anything about writing a novel. And so I took a short class. I just looked for I looked for a class on writing short stories and found the one about flash fiction. I didn't even know what flash fiction was until then. But the reason I wanted to take some time to talk about that is my sweet spot for writing a scene is about 1,300 words. And so certainly a scene is not a full story, but kind of cutting my teeth on flash fiction stories really just gave me just one additional extra step of about 300 more words to get a full scene written. And the way I like to think about it is once you get a scene written, baby, you're writing a book. So you write another one, and you write another one. And for me, I tend to have about 3 scenes in each chapter. So you write 3 scenes, you got a chapter. And so for me, especially when you feel overwhelmed with like, what am I doing? I don't know what I'm doing. I didn't study this. I studied, medicine and public health. And, well, if you can just kind of figure out how to conceptualize it and kind of, in my way, convince yourself to do it, then before you know it, you're doing it. And that's how I did it.
So what does writing do for you? Like why does it, because you light up when you talk about your story. Yeah, I'm looking at the light on your face now. So what does writing do for you?
I just enjoy it. I'm intrigued by people. I like to say that if I was born wealthy, I'd be like a sociologist or a wedding planner, or maybe a wedding/event planner, which is funny. Instagram and Pinterest both think I am a wedding planner because of my most recent novel, A Gardin Wedding. So, yes, and the flowers in the background. But for me, it's just really kind of processing my thoughts about people and unpacking them. But also, I should say, writing is very much a part of my overall professional platform because my stories also have health themes. So for my first novel, it focused on heart disease, mental health, and the connection between them. And there are lots of scenes set in the counseling sessions. So I worked with a mental health sensitivity reader to make sure that I got those scenes right. And then my second novel focuses on vascular dementia, mental health, and couples counseling. So it's just writing.
Confession, I've started the first book.
Oh, really? Awesome.
I've started the first book, but I'm not that far into it. So I'm really intrigued now. Can you tell us a little bit about, what made you decide to make those connections? Because I think that's really exciting and a little bit, in some ways, groundbreaking. Because, in medicine, some of us know that there's a definite link between our mental health and our physical health. And so what made you decide to highlight that in your story?
So I just remember, I think about different, I was going to give the really specific answer that I've just changed my mind about because I don't want to give spoilers. I'm thinking, oh, they're doctors. I can tell them. And I'm like, no. But if you want to read the book, don't spoil
I have it right here. Read the book. We want you to read the book.
Thank you. So for me, like there are a couple health conditions that have just stuck out in my head a couple conditions in the first book, I should say, that's just stuck out in my head. Because really, I write about the conditions that are impactful to me. Maybe personally, but more because I think they're interesting and because I've thought, like, what's the story behind, what this person was going through? So for me, like, it's funny. People always would tell me that I wrote really good HPIs because it's storytelling. I figured that out. It took me a while to figure out. But it's like, I want to know all the details and I want to put them together in a nice way so that, because, when I see patients, I'm floating so that whoever looks at that note has a complete story. So it's very similar. It lends itself well to writing fiction. So it's like, what's the story behind if a person has this particular medical condition? And particularly if they have something going on with their heart and it's connected to mental health, what's the story behind that? And so that's how I conceived of kind of the character arc for one of my characters in A Gardin Wedding. And that's how I chose the illness that particular character has. So hopefully I answered that sufficiently without
giving it away. Yeah, I think so. So tell me, do you mean for your writing to loosely be an educational tool as well?
Absolutely, but not loosely, but to
Okay.
definitely be an
Okay.
educational tool. Now, it is not the same as if a physician is talking to a patient or referring them to a lifestyle management program, or someone's working with a nutritionist or anything like that. It's not the same. But I think that people have different ways of learning. And people tend to connect with other people and with stories. And for some people, when they read a story or they watch a film, they really connect with those characters, particularly if there's something about it that
Yeah.
really resonates with them, and they will remember it. And so if people can read my stories and get some tools to help them navigate through life and to help them make healthier choices, then I have done what I set out to do from my physician persona. I like to say that's the goal of my decision to put health themes into my stories. But otherwise, what's different from when I'm seeing patients is my primary goal with writing fiction is to entertain people. And
Hmm.
so that's the difference. There are people who say, well, why'd you use the pen name? Why aren't they the same? Because each of these brands, the Ayanna Buckner brand and the Rosey Lee brand, they have different goals. And so it
Okay.
also helps me not to venture too far off, because
Sure.
people don't want an author preaching to them. If they wanted
Right.
that, they would go elsewhere for their entertainment.
Yeah. Yeah. So what made you choose fiction instead of nonfiction?
I don't think, well, first of all, probably because I'm a very private person, I
Okay.
don't I don't have that much about my life that I really want to share in gross
Sure.
detail to write a memoir. But also, and there's certainly physicians who write about very important topics that are nonfiction, but that's just not where I felt called. Again,
Mhm.
I've always wanted to write fiction. I started off writing poetry. And then from that, would write short stories in school, but always just had the goal of writing a novel. So for me, again, it's kind of what came first, the chicken or the egg. For me,
Yeah.
fiction came first. I wanted to write novels.
Okay. So now I have gotten far enough into the book to notice that
Okay.
the characters have biblical names.
They
So
do.
what made you tie biblical characters to your fiction? Because now you're mixing all kinds of things together,
Ah,
right? You're mixing
well,
medicine, you're mixing the Bible.
for me, my writing is about life.
Okay.
I pray, I go to church. So my characters pray and my characters go to church. They just live life. My characters have messy family drama, but because in real life we don't always get a happy ending, a Rosey Lee story is going to give you a happy ending. So for me, it's just a reflection of life. But you heard me mention that I got an idea for a novel around 2008, 2009. And so the idea that I got, it was that I always wondered, I'm doing Bible studies, going to church, listening to sermons. I always wondered what happened after the stories told in the Bible.
Okay.
And so, and as some people who are many biblical scholars have told me during my book events, well, there is an answer here, and then the Bible tells us this, and this other text tells us that. Yes, I know those things too because I read too. But I thought about, in a contemporary setting, the type of world that we live in today, what would make Ruth and Naomi, who are mother-in-law and daughter-in-law from the Old Testament, what would make Ruth decide that after her husband died, that she would go back to her mother-in-law's hometown instead of going to her family?
Right.
So, of course, in the Bible, there were reasons.
Right.
But in the contemporary setting, I figured, oh, she probably has some family drama that's going on.
Mhm.
And so let's unpack that. And I put Ruth and Naomi in the same family as Mary and Martha from the New Testament. So for biblical scholars who are watching, this book is not doctrinally
Right.
sound, it's fiction, but it is okay. My pastor said I'm fine. So I am not trying to convert anybody, but just trying to uplift people with this
Sure.
story. And so with the Mary and Martha characters in the Bible, Martha was in the kitchen cooking. Her sister Mary was sitting at the foot of Jesus, just enjoying time with him and learning from him. And Martha's like, girl, if you don't get yourself in this kitchen and help me cook this food for Jesus. And, there's a whole story, of course, about how Jesus responded. But I thought, well, I always thought, what's the sister dynamic like between those two? So for Martha, not just to feel that way, but to speak out in front of Jesus.
Right. Sure.
What kind of personality would she have in the modern day setting? And so I had a lot of fun with the Martha character, who happens to be a physician, because, we are on the She Built It, Boss Lady Chronicles, and Martha is certainly a boss lady, let me tell you. And so I had a lot of fun really playing around with their relationship within the setting of this family dynamic. In the fictional town of Edin, Georgia. So the first book in this series is called The Gardins of Edin. So the family's last name is Gardin, Gardin, spelled a little differently from the traditional Garden of Eden. That's intentional, so that people may pick up that there's a little flavor of something having to do with the Garden of Eden or something having to do with the Bible. And it's just that it's a nod to the fact that the women's characters are loosely based on women of the Bible.
Okay.
The personalities, I should say, are loosely based on women of the Bible.
Yeah. So I'm really intrigued by your curiosity.
Okay.
So do you, when you look at most situations, do you approach them with this voracious curiosity? Because that's what I think, that's kind of what it takes to look at those biblical stories and say, I wonder what the sister dynamic was really like, or I wonder what happened after this, or I wonder what made Ruth decide to, follow Naomi, or what would that look like in modern times? I mean, that's really interesting to me.
Yeah, it just seems normal to me. I just always wondered it, and I figured other people did too. I was honestly shocked that no one else had written, at least no one else has published a book that we can tell that answers the question of what happened, loosely fictionalized version of what happened after the story's told in the Bible. So every time, you'll be watching BET and there's some story about, that's like based on David and Saul, and I like get nervous, like, have they stolen my idea? Do they have the same idea? And they never had. And so I was really itching to get this story out.
Yeah, I love it. So now the second book, is it a sequel?
So it is, yeah. So the second book is called A Gardin Wedding. It seems weird to put it in front of my face. It's called A Gardin Wedding, and this book focuses on Martha, who is the troublemaker of the Gardin family. So essentially, you can read the books out of order, but if you want to really understand the nuance of the family drama and how Martha ends up in the position that she's in the second book, then you would want to read the first book. So the first book is about how the Gardin family is really at a crossroad, where Ruth married into the Gardin family. Her husband passed away. She moved to Eden, and she falls in love with her deceased husband's cousin. So she marries him. That is what happened in the Bible. But I thought, and that was normal back in that day. But within the construct of a family that owns a multi-million-dollar peanut empire, there might be some folks in the family who might think she's a bit of a gold digger. And that's just rich with drama. I love it. Can you tell I grew up watching Dynasty and The Young and the Restless when I was supposed to be taking a nap as a 5-year-old? Yes. That's what happened. So maybe that's where my curiosity came from. What is Victor Newman doing? I don't know. Because we're still trying to figure out what is Victor Newman doing today. So and so I just thought that would just be really fun, and again in a present day setting. And so the story opens with Martha saying, okay, Ruth, it's been a year since your husband Bo died, and we thank you for your service to the family, but it's time for you to go. Like, we're ready to go our separate ways. So the main character of the first book is really the family, but the story is told from the point of view of each of the women in the family. And so you really get to find out what's going on with each of them. There's a romantic thread in the book. I won't say much more. You'll have to see what happens. But it's just, I think, a lot of fun. And so essentially, all of the women grow by the end of the first book and kind of get to a good, healthy place, except our troublemaker, Martha. We just didn't have enough space in that book to get her together. So true to her personality, she demanded that she have her own book. And so that's what a Gardin Wedding picks up with her. And so she gets a taste of her own medicine in A Gardin Wedding. And goes on her own journey of healing.
Well, excellent. I'm excited to read. I'm excited to finish this one. I'm excited to read the next one. But I want to know what is next for Rosey Lee.
So I'm currently working on book 3. I've
Okay.
conceived this. So initially, I really only planned to write a standalone. I didn't think I was the type of author to write a series. I think it's great that people can do that, but I didn't think I had that skill set. But again, Martha she just was a handful. And so needed her own book. And so I conceived of it really as a 3-book series.
Okay.
But as I have done interviews like this and talked to people at book club meetings and at book signings, people have asked me questions, and essentially I've listened to those questions and I've come up with an idea for book 4.
Oh
So
boy.
yeah, so my
Okay.
plan is to write books 3 and 4. And then, we'll see what happens. So I don't have contracts for those yet.
Sure.
So we'll work on that. So that's the next plan, to get a contract for books 3
Okay.
and 4. So y'all better buy this book so I can write books 3 and 4.
Yes, please do. 'Cause we got to find out what happens, right?
I
And
know.
I love, I love how these characters have just come to life,
They really
in a brand new way.
Yeah, Martha is, it really, because again, I base my characters on questions that I have in life. And so the Martha character, and really the idea behind the Gardins of Eden, the first book, is how are there people in our families who are just allowed to wreak havoc and who are never held responsible for that? And so, although Martha is not the main character of the first book, it's really that question, which is all based on the Martha character. That's what started the series. And so it's just like in medicine, you have one thing that you're looking at and you work through that, but then you realize there's some more pathways that we've got to go down to make
Yes.
this individual healthy. So this is what we're doing to make this family healthy. And it's just hopefully turning into a 4-book series.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I'm excited, and I can't
Thank
wait
you.
for the other books to come out, and we'll have you back, and maybe we'll do a book club. But I'm excited.
I would
So
love
now,
that.
what is next for Dr. Ayanna? That's the thing. So how is all of this? How is all of this meshing together?
So, I just plan my schedule. People ask me all the time, well, are you planning to leave medicine alone and write full time? And my answer is no. I really love this model that I have, that I divide my time between community health consulting and writing fiction. For me, it's all tied together. So that's really my plan. And for me, it almost sounds kind of boring. Like, I don't know what's next. We're just going to keep writing books and keep doing community health consulting. I mean, it's because clearly we have a lot more work to do in this country. So I'm just going to keep
For
working on
sure.
it. That's just about it.
Absolutely. But in the meantime, boss lady, keep building the life that you love. I
Thank
like
you.
this.
Thank you.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
like this so much.
I really appreciate it. I'm having a lot of fun. And I think for me, there are lots of hard things that happen in life, particularly as parents age, as we age, as things happen in the world and in our communities, and we have to adapt to them. And I just continue to challenge myself to seek joy. And so I hope to bring people joy through my books. That's, again, it's all tied together for me.
So I do have a one last question, I guess. Maybe the last question. We'll see. But what made you know that you could keep evolving, that you could stretch in a different kind of way? Because you mentioned when you kind of got this inkling that you wanted to write, that
Mhm.
you decided to do a class,
Mhm.
in fiction writing. So what made you stretch yourself in that way?
For me, I think just being true to myself. Like, what is it that I feel like I'm supposed to be doing? Even though I started off telling you how I wanted to be a fashion designer and actress, and I was very serious about it. I really was. Like, I made used to make my dresses for school dances and prom. I was serious. But when I pivoted toward medicine, I was also very serious about that. And so
Hmm.
for me, it's following my heart. I give talks to medical students and residents about how I ended up in my career as a community health consultant. And I always say it's about following your heart. And that's just what I do. I'm a warm and fuzzy person who believes, chase joy.
I love it. That's a actually, I'm not going to ask another question because that's a perfect place to end.
Oh,
Chase joy. Yeah,
chase
chase joy. That's beautiful. Well,
joy.
thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you coming on tonight and sharing with us. I really loved hearing about your journey and learning more about your process and about your books. It's very inspirational. So we will chase joy.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed talking with you, and I've been looking forward to it too. And this did not disappoint.
Thank you. So okay, guys. So your job is to buy this book, read it, buy the next book so that we can get contracts for books 3 and 4. All of the contact information for Dr. Ayanna will be in the show notes. And if you have questions for her, I forgot to invite you guys to say hi to us. I've been on hiatus. I apologize. I didn't invite you to say hi to us. I didn't invite you to ask questions, but definitely if you have questions, put your questions in the chat. I'm happy to pass those on. And if you want to say hi now, you can do that too. But thank you so much for joining us tonight. Again, don't forget we are doing the Press Pause mini retreat this Saturday at 11. So if you need your reset, you just need a little bit of a refresh, fill your cup a little bit on a Saturday morning, join us. And registration is still open for a weekend for me, Grand Cayman, October 2nd through the 5th. I would love to host you. It is going to be an amazing time. So that's it for tonight. We will see you all again next week. Take care.
Bye, everyone.